I've heard some crazy stories in my day, lived through a few of them myself. But if you told me a year ago that my Tuesday afternoon would involve two muscle-bound wannabes dressed like knockoff G.I. Joes bashing down my front door with a battering ram, I'd have told you to switch off the soap operas and get some fresh air. Yet there I was, heart pounding like a snare drum in a war zone, staring at the splintered remains of the solid oak door I had personally and lovingly restored. Shards the size of my forearm littered the floor. The frame looked like it had been gnawed on by a bear with a grudge. And standing in the middle of it all were two overgrown man-children who seemed more confused than intimidating, outfitted in cheap Navy uniforms sporting HOA enforcement patches that looked like they'd been ironed on during a drunken arts and crafts session. Behind them, practically quivering with self-importance, stood the true architect of the chaos. Brenda, call me Madam President McGillicuddy. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because this suburban showdown is one for the history books. And you won't believe how it ends. So how did I, a retired architectural engineer with a taste for peace, quiet, and gardening, end up in what felt like the opening act of a low-budget action flick? As with all tragedies, it began with something laughably small. Whispering Pines isn't exactly a breeding ground for rebellion. It's the kind of place where the biggest controversy is whether the community center's walls should be beige or eggshell serenity. But then came Brenda. She moved in with a blood-red Lexus, a closet full of sequin pantsuits, and a dream of restoring order to the neighborhood. Her version of order meant ruling with a rhinestone-studded fist. Our first clash came when I planted a vegetable garden in my backyard, a modest, perfectly maintained little patch with tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs. The next HOA newsletter, suddenly printed on migraine-inducing pink paper, included a not-so-subtle jab at certain agricultural activities that compromised neighborhood aesthetics. That was Brenda speak for, "I hate your tomatoes." I replied politely, citing the bylaws, every last word of which I had read before moving in. There were no rules against backyard gardens. I even attached a photo of my heirloom tomatoes, County Fair award-winning, thinking maybe she'd see reason or even a little local pride. Wrong. That only fanned her fury. Next came a fine. Then another. Then a personal note scrawled on a pink notice, "Your blatant disregard for community harmony is noted, M. Henderson." My name is Frank Harrison. But I suppose she had Mrs. Henderson and her roses on the brain. After the garden debacle, it was the mailbox. Regulation black, mind you, but apparently the wrong black. According to Brenda's divine color perception, it clashed with the original developer's palette. Never mind that said developers had been dead for over a decade. Then she came for the bird feeder. My late wife Carol used to love sitting on the porch watching the birds. I kept it going for her. Brenda claimed it attracted disease and vermin, and that the chirping created noise pollution. I half expected a demand that I muzzle the crickets next. Each new offense came with another pink slip and a fine, and each time I responded with calm, fact-based letters, attaching scanned bylaws, even legal citations regarding HOA authority. I wasn't trying to start a war. I believed in order too, just not tyranny. My efforts only made her angrier. I started saving every letter, every response, every photo, every pink slip, digitally and in a binder I labeled the Brenda Chronicles. I wasn't alone. Other neighbors were targeted too, especially those who avoided her community coffee mornings, which were mostly just gossip and Brenda grandstanding in leopard print. Mr. Abernathy, a World War II veteran, got fined for wind chimes she claimed disrupted nocturnal peace. They were bamboo and barely audible. Sarah Jenkins, a single mom, received a violation because her son left his bicycle on the porch for an hour after school. Brenda patrolled the neighborhood in her hideous gold golf cart, her chariot of chagrin, clipboard in hand, hunting for rule breakers like some twisted mall cop. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It was harassment. She'd slow down in front of my house, sometimes park and just stare. But I refused to bend. I paid no fines. I responded to every accusation with logic, evidence, and a straight spine. The final straw was my son Liam. He's Navy, the kind of work he can't talk about and I don't ask. He was coming home for his first leave in almost 2 years. I wanted everything to be just right. The guest room window was drafty, so I replaced it. Simple job. Same size. Same look. Just a more energy-efficient double-pane model. No exterior changes. No bylaw violation. Apparently it looked too nice. The following Monday I got a different kind of pink slip. Not just a fine, but a demand for a full inspection of my property, interior and exterior, to assess unauthorized modifications and ensure compliance with building codes. That's when everything changed. The HOA had no legal authority to enforce what they were demanding. That responsibility belonged to the county. But the letter I received hinted ominously at further action if I didn't comply within 48 hours. It wasn't signed by just Brenda. It bore the names of 2 other board members, lackeys I knew she'd cowed into obedience. This wasn't a notice. It was a declaration of war. My son Liam was arriving in 3 days. I wasn't about to let a delusional neighborhood tyrant spoil his homecoming or violate my rights. I sent a registered letter that same day, stating in clear legal terms that I would not permit entry without a court order or a valid warrant issued by real law enforcement. I reminded them they had no jurisdiction to demand access over a routine window replacement that violated no rule or code. I cited relevant state laws regarding homeowner privacy and property rights. I gave my attorney a courtesy call. And I installed a new security camera, high definition with audio, facing the porch. If Brenda wanted escalation, I would match her. Not with threats, but with precision. Then nothing. 2 full days of silence. No fines, no letters, no petty notices. It was the quiet hum before a circuit blows. Liam's flight was due to land at noon on Tuesday. At 1:10 a.m. that very Tuesday, the doorbell rang, not a neighborly chime but a pounding thud that rattled the walls. I checked the peephole. Brenda stood there, flanked by 2 enforcers I hadn't seen before. My stomach dropped. The petty tyrant of Whispering Pines had arrived for her reckoning, and she'd brought backup. The quiet anticipation I'd felt for Liam's return evaporated the moment I saw Brenda's face. She wore a power blue pantsuit that did nothing to soften her sharp, triumphant expression. Her thin lips were pressed in a line of grim purpose. Behind those narrow glasses, her eyes gleamed with something dark, eagerness, maybe even glee. To her right stood a man built like a retired linebacker, his face weathered like old leather, his gut straining the buttons of his ill-fitting shirt. To her left was a younger brute, stiff with forced bravado, his buzz cut only accentuating the way his ears stuck out like radar dishes. The HOA enforcement patches on their sleeves looked freshly ironed, like costumes instead of credentials. I thought of the registered letter. The camera now quietly recording. The binder with the laws and correspondence printed and stacked by the door. Brenda thought she could corner me. She thought intimidation would make me cave. She hadn't planned for preparation. I took a slow breath. Liam would be landing in just a few hours. I wasn't about to let this absurd ambush derail the calm, peaceful welcome he deserved. I opened the door just a crack, the security chain still locked in place. "Brenda," I said evenly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Her smile was a jagged thing. "Mr. Harrison, finally. We're here for the scheduled inspection of your property as per the official notice. You are aware that failure to comply will result in daily fines and legal action. Open the door." No greetings. No civility. Just pure power play. Her goons shifted their weight, trying to look menacing. It might have worked, if I hadn't already seen better performances from mall security. "Actually, Brenda," I replied, matching her formal tone, "as per my registered letter, which I have delivery confirmation for, you have no legal authority to demand entry into my residence without a warrant or my express permission. You have neither. My window replacement is compliant with all county regulations and your own bylaws, which, as you know, do not grant you inspection rights over routine maintenance." I held up her letter and the receipt. The older enforcer grunted. "Look, buddy, just open the door. We don't have all day." Brenda's smile faltered, her jaw tightening. "This is HOA property, Mr. Harrison. We have the right." "This," I interrupted calmly, "is my private property. An HOA does not give you blanket authority over a homeowner's interior. Unless you can show me the bylaw ratified by a majority of residents and consistent with state law, that gives you that power for a basic window replacement, then you are trespassing. There was a flicker in her eyes, anger or uncertainty, I couldn't tell. Probably both. Brenda hated being corrected, especially when the correction came wrapped in facts. Don't you try to school me on bylaws, Mr. Harrison. I am the bylaws. I am the president. Now are you going to cooperate, or are we going to have to do this the hard way? The younger goon cracked his knuckles. I actually chuckled. The hard way, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. And what exactly does that look like, Brenda? Are your friends here planning to force entry? Because I should warn you, this entire interaction is being recorded. I nodded toward the nearly invisible camera above the door. For a second, Brenda blinked. Even her enforcers hesitated. But the flicker of doubt passed quickly. Her pride wouldn't allow retreat. Don't you threaten me, she snapped. We are empowered by the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association Board of Directors to ensure compliance. I didn't flinch. Then go get a court order. And when you do, be sure to bring someone with a badge. Until then, you're just another trespasser at my door. What Brenda didn't know, what she could never imagine, is that this standoff was only the beginning. And I had plans that would make every petty power play she'd ever staged look like a warm-up act. Your unpermitted structural alteration poses a potential risk, Brenda had declared. A window, Brenda? I replied. A double-glazed, professionally installed window is a risk? What kind? One that might save me too much on my energy bill. Or is it just too aesthetically pleasing for your sensibilities? The sarcasm, usually kept under tight control, was starting to slip. This whole spectacle had passed ridiculous 3 stops ago. Then I remembered something I'd read about Brenda after her tomato-tossing stunt. She'd once been a regional manager for a fast fashion chain. Cheap stores, cheaper clothes. She was used to snapping at teenagers behind cash registers, not confronting someone who understood leverage, legal precedent, and the power of documentation. Enough of this. Open this door now or we will gain entry, she shrieked, her voice cracking. The older enforcer gripped the doorknob like he meant to force it. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said, my tone suddenly sharper. That would be attempted forced entry. And you still haven't shown me a warrant. There was a glint in Brenda's eyes, a malicious one. This was what she wanted. A confrontation. An excuse to assert control. She was so wrapped in her personal vendetta, she couldn't see how close she was to stepping off a legal and ethical cliff. This is your final warning, Harrison, she spat. I have 2 authorized enforcement officers here. We will conduct this inspection, for the safety and integrity of the community. I looked at her. Come. Clear. No, Brenda. You won't. Not without due process. If you don't have a warrant, I suggest you and your team leave my property before I call the actual police and report you for harassment and attempted trespassing. I began to close the door. The younger enforcer slammed his shoulder against it, trying to break the chain. The wood groaned. Hey, I barked, genuinely angry now. That's enough. But Brenda saw it as a cue. Do it, she shouted. Get it open. He's obstructing official HOA business. I'll take full responsibility. That was all her thugs needed. The older one stepped back, then launched himself forward, slamming his full weight just below the lock. The chain snapped like thread. Before they could shove the door wide, the younger one, maybe trying to impress his queen bee, pulled a stubby battering ram from a bag I hadn't noticed. Not a police-grade tool, more like something bought from a shady website and marketed for emergencies. He swung. The sound was sickening. A hard, cracking impact like a tree limb snapping in a storm. My beautiful oak door, the one I'd restored by hand, splintered at the lock. Another swing and the lock exploded from the frame, the door crashing open against the wall in a violent jolt that shook the whole entryway. Dust and splinters filled the air. For a moment, everything froze. A breathless, stunned silence. Then Brenda exhaled in triumph. She stepped over the threshold with a slow, deliberate smirk. Now, Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice soaked in poisonous satisfaction. About that window. She strode inside, completely oblivious to the storm she had just summoned. Her goons followed, smug and panting like they'd breached enemy lines. Brenda's smirk deepened. "See, Mr. Harrison," she chirped, sweeping her finger across the antique table, tracing a line in the fine coat of dust the destruction had stirred. "This is what happens when you refuse to cooperate. A little civility goes a long way." She turned, eyes locked on the hallway. "Now, let's go take a look at the unauthorized structural modification, shall we?" She made for the guest room, her enforcers trailing like mutts behind her. I stood frozen. Not in fear, no. What I felt was colder than that. A rising, calculated fury. They'd just committed criminal trespass. Destruction of property. They had broken into my home, literally. I was about to speak, loudly, when another sound joined the chaos. It wasn't a crash or a shout. Just a quiet click. A door opening farther down the hall. The kitchen door. Then a calm voice. Steady. Measured. "Dad? Everything okay out here?" The effect was immediate. Brenda stopped mid-stride, stumbling slightly. Her thugs tensed, glancing at each other like kids caught shoplifting. Then my son Liam stepped into the hallway. He wiped his hands on a dish towel. He'd arrived early, it seemed, and used the back entrance, his usual habit when I was distracted. He'd let himself in with his key, likely made a snack, completely unaware that a suburban war zone was erupting just a few rooms away. Liam didn't look imposing in a Hollywood sense. Lean, casually built. But there was something about him, a stillness, a quiet presence that needed no volume to command attention. The kind of calm that comes from facing things most people can't imagine and walking away stronger. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He looked at the shattered door, the splintered frame, the intruders in the hallway. Then he looked at me. His expression shifted, mild curiosity folding into something colder, sharper. "What the hell happened to your door?" he asked, his tone soft but firm. "No drama. Just control." Brenda, puffing herself back up, tried to recover her narrative. "And who might you be, young man? This is official HOA business." She didn't get to finish. "We are conducting an inspection." Liam's gaze shifted to her, not hostile, just appraising, as though she were a curious insect pinned beneath glass. "I'm Liam Harrison. This is my father's house." "And you are?" The younger goon, the one still gripping the handle of the battering ram like a comfort object, puffed up. "We're HOA enforcement. We don't answer to you, kid." Liam looked at him, no expression, just a glance. A single dismissive flick of the eyes. That was all it took. The goon visibly deflated. "HOA enforcement," Liam repeated, lifting an eyebrow. "And your method of enforcement involves demolishing private property?" He took a step forward, still calm, still holding the apple. But the air changed. The hallway felt denser, the tension rising like a coming storm. "There was a misunderstanding regarding access," Brenda said, her voice no longer certain. "Your father was being uncooperative with a mandatory inspection of an unauthorized structural alteration." Liam's eyes flicked to the splintered door frame, then back to her. "Uncooperative, huh? So you authorized these men to break down his door? Do you have a warrant for that?" "We don't need a warrant," Brenda said, though her tone was wavering. "The HOA bylaws grant us right of entry to ensure community standards and safety." The older goon chimed in, echoing her. "Yeah, it's in the rules. President McGillicuddy said so." But he wasn't convincing anyone, least of all himself. Liam took another measured step forward. He didn't need to raise his voice or posture. He simply was. "Which specific bylaw, Madam President, grants you the authority for forced, non-consensual entry and destruction of property without a court order? Because as far as I'm aware, and I make it my business to understand rules and consequences, what just happened here constitutes several felonies." He said the word like a sentence. "Breaking and entering. Destruction of property over a certain threshold. Possibly conspiracy to commit said acts. You're aware of the penalties for those, I assume?" His delivery was emotionless, clinical, but it hit with the weight of a falling gavel. Brenda paled. The younger goon was looking at the floor. The older one was staring at the door, no doubt calculating the repair bill. I found my voice at last. "Liam, they refused to leave when I asked." Then they used a battering ram after I denied entry without a warrant. I told them they were being recorded. I gestured to the camera in the corner. Liam nodded, his gaze never leaving Brenda. A battering ram, he repeated. Interesting choice of tool for an inspection. Were you expecting armed resistance over a window pane? Brenda sputtered. This is outrageous. I am the president. You can't speak to me like this. My husband is an influential man. Liam didn't flinch. Influence rarely supersedes criminal statutes, Mrs. McGillicuddy. Now I suggest you and your team remain exactly where you are. He glanced at me. Dad, call 911. Let's get the actual authorities to sort this out. I moved to obey, but Liam raised a hand. Actually, wait. He turned to the men. Gentlemen, may I see your identification? Specifically, your state licenses to operate as private security or investigators. Licenses that permit forcible entry. They looked at each other, then at Brenda, then back at Liam. Blank stares. We work for the HOA, the older one mumbled. Brenda hired us. Hired you to do what exactly? Liam asked, his voice still low. Break things? And does Mrs. McGillicuddy indemnify her employees against felony charges? Panic flickered across their faces. Brenda attempted to regain control. They are legitimate security. Don't you try to intimidate us. Her voice had risen in pitch. She sounded like someone trying to command a storm with a whistle. Liam didn't even acknowledge her. So no licenses. No formal training in entry protocol, warrant procedures, or use of force regulations. Just a battering ram and misplaced enthusiasm. He paused. You both understand how much trouble you're in regardless of who signed the check. Silence. The younger one was on the verge of tears. The older looked like he was about to be sick. I realized then what Liam truly was. Not just strong, not just capable. He was surgical. Precise. A quiet professional who used calm and logic the way others used force. And Brenda McGillicuddy had walked into his house uninvited. The real police were on their way. And something told me the next chapter in the Brenda saga was going to be nothing short of legendary. The shriek of sirens broke the silence. A comforting sound this time. Not distant, not abstract. Approaching justice. I had made the 911 call as Liam methodically dismantled their illusion of authority. I kept it simple. Forced entry. Property damage. 3 intruders still present. One claiming to be the HOA president. Mentioning the battering ram had escalated their response. Brenda, who had cycled through defiance, indignation, and now dawning dread, tried one last desperate play. This is a misunderstanding, she insisted. We can handle this internally. There's no need for police. Liam had subtly positioned himself between them and any possible exit. That ship sailed, Mrs. McGillicuddy, the moment your team brought a power tool to a front door. And for the record, discouraging or interfering with a 911 call is its own offense. I recommend quiet contemplation. She deflated. Visibly. Her tailored blue pantsuit, once a symbol of faux authority, now looked like a cheap Halloween costume. The 2 enforcers shrank in her shadow. The younger was visibly trembling, eyes darting between Liam and the exit. He didn't seem eager to test his luck. 2 cruisers pulled up. Red and blue lights flickered across the shattered doorway. 2 officers stepped out, one older, seasoned, the other younger, alert. They took in the damage, the debris, the 3 culprits standing stiffly in the hall. And Liam, unflinching, guarding his father's home. The older officer spoke first. All right, folks. What seems to be the problem here? Before Brenda could rewrite history, I stepped forward. Officer, thank you for coming. I'm Frank Harrison, the homeowner. These individuals, led by Mrs. Brenda McGillicuddy, forcibly entered my home without a warrant. They destroyed my front door with a battering ram. I gestured to the tool lying in the wreckage. The officer's brows rose slightly. He looked at the door. Then the ram. Then at Brenda. A battering ram, ma'am? Is that true? Brenda opened her mouth. What came out was a shrill, defensive gasp. He was violating HOA bylaws. There was an unapproved structural change. We had to inspect. He was being obstructive. So you decided to unobstruct him with that? The younger officer pointed to the ram, disbelief clear in his tone. Liam spoke next. His tone was respectful, but like everything else about him, controlled and precise. Officers, my father previously informed Mrs. McGillicuddy via certified mail that she was not to enter without a warrant. We were conducting an inspection. Liam's gaze shifted to her. It wasn't hostile, merely appraising like a scientist studying a peculiar insect. I'm Liam Harrison. This is my father's house. And you are? The younger of the two men, the one who'd wielded the battering ram, stepped forward. We're HOA enforcement. We don't answer to you, kid. Liam glanced at him briefly, then dismissed him without a word. That subtle look seemed to puncture the man's bravado. He shrank slightly, deflated. HOA enforcement, Liam repeated, one eyebrow raised. And you enforce things by demolishing private property? He stepped forward. Still calm. Still holding the apple. But the air in the hallway had changed. It had weight now. There was a misunderstanding about access, Brenda said, voice tinged with uncertainty. Your father was uncooperative regarding a mandatory inspection of an unauthorized structural alteration. Liam looked down at the splintered door jamb, then back at her. Uncooperative, huh? So you authorized this? Breaking down his door? Do you have a warrant? We don't need a warrant, Brenda insisted, though even she seemed unsure now. The HOA bylaws give us entry rights for community standards and safety. The older goon nodded. Yeah, it's in the rules. President McGillicuddy said so. But Brenda was pale now, like someone realizing they'd mistaken a beehive for a piñata. Liam took another slow step forward. Not threatening, but commanding. Which specific bylaw, Madam President, gives you the authority to forcibly enter a home and destroy property without a court order? I'd love to read it. Because state law, which I do make it my business to understand, says otherwise. What you've done here looks a lot like breaking and entering, destruction of property, maybe even conspiracy. Do you understand the penalties for those? His voice was clinical. Cool. The word felonies seemed to hit like a hammer. Brenda visibly paled. The younger goon looked at his shoes. The older one was staring at the wrecked door like it might collapse again from shame. I found my voice. Liam, they refused to leave. They used a battering ram after I told them they couldn't come in without a warrant. I told them it was all being recorded. I gestured to the camera. Liam nodded. A battering ram, he echoed dryly. Seems a bit extreme for an inspection. Were you expecting armed resistance over a window pane? Brenda sputtered. This is outrageous. I'm the president. You can't speak to me like this. My husband is a very influential man. Liam didn't blink. Influence doesn't supersede criminal law, Mrs. McGillicuddy. Now I suggest you and your team stay exactly where you are. Dad, call 911. I reached for my phone. Actually, wait, Liam said. He looked at the two enforcers. Gentlemen, may I see your licenses? State certifications to operate as security personnel. Specifically for forcible entry or private investigation. They exchanged glances. Then looked to Brenda. Then back to Liam. Blank stares. The older one mumbled, we work for the HOA. Brenda hired us. Hired you to do what, exactly? Break things? Does she indemnify her employees against felony charges? Their panic was visible now. Brenda tried to rally. They're legitimate security. Don't try to intimidate us. Liam didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on the men. So no licenses, no formal training. Just enthusiasm and a battering ram. You understand how much trouble you're in regardless of who hired you. Silence. The younger man looked like he might cry. The older one looked sick. And in that moment I understood who Liam really was. Not just my son. Not just a Navy man. He was something more. Someone who could take a volatile situation and dismantle it with precision and logic, without raising his voice or making a single threat. Brenda and her rented enforcers had no idea who they'd messed with. The wail of sirens broke the silence. Comforting in a strange way. I had made the 911 call as Liam coolly unraveled their authority. I'd kept the report brief. Forced entry, destruction of property, 3 individuals still on site, one claiming to be HOA president. I mentioned the battering ram. That seemed to speed things up. Brenda, now teetering on the edge of hysteria, cried out, "This is a misunderstanding. We can sort it out internally." Liam, now standing between them and the door, looked at her evenly. "That ship sailed the moment your associates took a power tool to my father's front door. Attempting to interfere with a 911 call is another offense. I suggest silence." Brenda deflated. Her power blue pantsuit now looked pitifully blue. The enforcers looked ready to bolt but also understood they wouldn't get far. 2 cruisers arrived. Lights flashing. Officers Miller and Henderson stepped out. Miller, older, clearly seasoned. Henderson looked sharp. They took in the scene quickly. The shattered door, the 3 individuals trying to look casual under Liam's unflinching gaze. "What's going on here?" Miller asked. Before Brenda could speak, I stepped forward. "I'm Frank Harrison, owner of this home. These 3 forcibly entered after I denied them access. They used a battering ram." I pointed to the tool. Miller raised an eyebrow. "A battering ram? Ma'am, is that true?" Brenda's voice was a shrill squawk. "He was violating HOA bylaws. An unpermitted window. He was obstructive." "So you decided to unobstruct him?" Henderson said. Liam stepped in. "Officers, my father had previously notified Mrs. McGillicuddy in writing via registered mail that she had no legal standing to demand entry without a warrant. He reiterated that today. She ignored that and ordered these men to breach the door." He handed over his military ID and license. Henderson's eyebrows rose. He handed the ID to Miller. They both regarded Liam with new respect. The goons, Butch and Ricky, were questioned. Their story fell apart immediately. Butch had an expired mall cop license. Ricky had a Blockbuster card from 2003. They had been hired off Craigslist. Brenda had offered them a bonus if they could resolve the situation. Interpretations had varied. Miller's expression turned cold. "Ma'am, ordering people to forcibly enter a private residence without authority is a felony. Breaking and entering. Vandalism. Possibly conspiracy. HOA bylaws don't override the law." Brenda looked like she might faint. "But I'm the president." "Not anymore, you're not," Miller said. "You're being detained for questioning. Get your attorney." Butch and Ricky were cuffed. Ricky began to cry. Butch looked like a man who'd just seen his future vanish. Brenda was escorted to a cruiser, shooting me a look of hate. But I saw the fear behind it. She'd been dethroned, not by rebellion but by arrogance. And by my son. Liam turned to me. "You okay, Dad?" "Better now," I said. "Though I think I'll need a new door." He clapped me on the shoulder. "We'll get you a stronger one. Maybe steel reinforced." The battle wasn't over. Legal proceedings would follow. So would HOA meetings from hell. But the threat had been crushed. The neighborhood would remember this day. The Battle of Harrison's Hallway. And Brenda McGillicuddy, queen of petty tyranny, had met her reckoning. But right now, all Liam wanted to know was whether I was still making ribs for dinner. Some victories deserve celebration. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Butch and Ricky were charged with multiple felonies. Brenda was charged with conspiracy, incitement, criminal damage, and more. Her attempts to play the misunderstood community leader were laughed out of court. She was found guilty on several counts. Fought. Put on probation. Barred from ever serving on any HOA board in the state again. The HOA board crumbled. 2 members resigned immediately. A special meeting was called. Standing room only. The community finally found its voice. People shared their stories. Tales of bullying, threats, absurd fines. Even Mrs. Henderson thanked me. I was asked to serve on the new board. I declined. I'd done my part. But I gave them the Brenda Chronicles and helped rewrite the bylaws. Term limits. Financial transparency. Independent dispute arbitration. And a new front door. My new front door was a custom-built, steel-reinforced solid mahogany unit. Liam had insisted on overseeing the specifications before returning to duty. It had a state-of-the-art locking system and just above the peephole, a small brass plaque that read, "Warrants welcome. Solicitors by appointment. HOA overlords not so much." A little piece of defiance that made me smile every time I came home. The cost of the door, the frame repair, and my legal consultations were eventually covered by a settlement from the HOA's insurance. Brenda's actions had been deemed outside the scope of protected board activity, which meant her own finances had to shoulder the bulk of her legal woes and court-ordered restitution. But money wasn't the real victory. What mattered was the shift in Whispering Pines itself. People started talking to each other again, not in whispers of fear or frustration, but in open, neighborly conversation. There was a sense of something reclaimed, dignity perhaps. Ownership of the community. My vegetable garden thrived, unbothered by warning slips. Mr. Abernathy's wind chime was once again free to sing. Sarah Jenkins' son left his bike on the porch without fear of fines from a woman who thought HOA president meant neighborhood monarch. Liam called occasionally. He didn't dwell on what happened, only saying he was glad I was okay and that common sense had finally prevailed. He never made a big deal out of it. To him, it was just another situation that required a steady hand and a clear head. He asked more about my heirloom tomatoes than about Brenda. That was his way. Do the job, protect your people, then step back. That's what professionals do. The incident became something of a legend. Remember the time Brenda McGillicuddy tried to go to war with Frank Harrison and his Navy SEAL son? It always got a laugh. It also became a cautionary tale in nearby HOA circles. Even the local police found use for it. Apparently, snippets of my security footage were used with my permission in their community relations training under the heading, What Not to Do When Dealing with the Public. Looking back, it was surreal, stressful, and yes, deeply satisfying. I wouldn't wish a Brenda McGillicuddy on anyone, but the experience taught me a few things. Know your rights. Document everything. Stand your ground even when the pressure mounts. And if you're lucky enough to have a highly trained, calm, and quietly formidable son home on leave when your HOA president goes off the rails, well, that doesn't hurt either. If you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, take heart. Sometimes all it takes is a little knowledge, a lot of patience, and just the right ace up your sleeve to change everything. Drop a comment if you've had your own run-in with a rogue HOA. Trust me, I've been there, and I've still got the plaque to prove it. Keep standing up. Keep documenting. And whatever you do, read the fine print. It might just save your front door, or your sanity.